Since the 1950s, the late-night talk show has been an integral part of American network programming. While changes in society and technology make them less relevant than they used to be, for a long time they were an important part of the zeitgeist. For decades, viewers tuned in before their bedtime just to see their host du jour talk about the day's events. That topicality, which I can assure you is a real word, don't bother looking it up, combined with a format that didn't lend itself well to reruns, meant that you had better watch it live or else you might miss out on something special. A magical moment could happen on any given night and at any given time. It could happen during a monologue. It could happen during a remote. It could happen during a musical performance. It could happen during an interview with a fictional serial killer who's on the show promoting the 8th installment of his film series, where in this one he goes to New York, but really he spends like 15 minutes in New York total, and that's really unfair marketing. It could even happen in the Ed Sullivan Theater on October 30th, 2002, when David Letterman sat down with a terminally ill musician named Warren Zevon.
But it's more valuable now. You're reminded to enjoy every sandwich and every minute of playing with the guys and being with the kids and everything.
But before we discuss the death of Warren Zevon, we first need to talk about the life of Warren Zevon. Let's get this out of the way. Yes, Warren Zevon is the guy who sang Werewolves of London, which for my money is still the best song ever written about someone drinking pina coladas. Suck it, Rupert Holmes. But Zevon was far more than just the werewolves guy. He first gained prominence in the 1970s as part of the legendary Los Angeles singer-songwriter scene that included stars like Jackson Browne, the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, and Fleetwood Mac, to name a few. After a decade of struggles, he finally reached mainstream success when his 1978 album Excitable Boy hit number 8 on the Billboard charts. While professionally things were finally breaking his way, personally, everything was already broken. Zevon was a legendary alcoholic, and not in the fun, "Oh, you're a legend" way. No. Legendary in the sense that the stories of his self-destructive behavior have approached almost mythic status. He was, for all intents and purposes, an absolute menace of a human to be around when he was drunk. And he was always drunk. As his drinking increased, his album sales decreased. Despite his immense talent, Zevon was unable to reach the levels of success that his peers did. By the mid-80s, Zevon had finally had enough and went to rehab. He stayed clean for pretty much the rest of his life. His career was still relatively stagnant, and Zevon never again got the success he had flirted with in the 70s. But instead of a large swath of fans, he cultivated a smaller yet devoted fan base. Being a Warren Zevon fan is a bit like being in a cult or a multi-level marketing scheme. You're always looking to recruit new members, and brother, I am looking to extend my downline. I know I've joked in videos before about how bad my musical taste is. I listen to Gigi Allen frequently while doing dishes, but Zevon is the one artist I like that I know for a fact is great. I know music is subjective to everyone, but I don't think there was anyone quite like Zevon. The man wrote songs with such dark humor and clever wordplay and beautiful sadness that you just couldn't fully fathom how this came out of another human being. I spent so much time in my life not even just listening to his songs, but sitting there after they ended, thinking about them. I could go on for hours of what made Warren Zevon great, and I don't think I'm even in the top 50% of his biggest fans. The people who love Zevon really love him. They are legion, and they are opinionated. I can at least rest easy knowing that I am among a very elite group of Zevon admirers. Admirers like Stephen King, Bruce Springsteen, Hunter S. Thompson, and former pro wrestler turned governor Jesse the Body Ventura, which means I finally have an excuse to show this clip.
Werewolves of London. Yahoo! Werewolves of London.
But of all the fans he had, none was more important to his legacy than David Letterman. As host of Late Night on NBC, Letterman was a breath of fresh air for the format. His brand of offbeat and surreal comedy was such a distinction from fellow NBC host Johnny Carson that Letterman attracted a far younger audience. It was a talk show that didn't try to be cool, it just was. Part of what made Letterman so appealing was the sense that he was doing whatever the hell he wanted, and that reflected in his guests. He didn't have Terry Garr and Richard Lewis on his show so frequently because they had stuff that needed promoting. He had them there because he wanted them there, and there was no musician he wanted there more than Warren Zevon. Letterman didn't know a hell of a lot about him until his girlfriend at the time, Meryl Marco, pointed him to a 1981 Rolling Stone article by Paul Nelson titled The Crack-Up and Resurrection of Warren Zevon. The article details one of Zevon's early attempts at sobriety, and Letterman became fascinated. After buying his albums and listening to songs like Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner and Desperados Under the Eaves, Letterman fully joined the cult of Zevon. In trying to ascribe Zevon's genius to Alan Siegel in a 2022 article for The Ringer, Letterman said of him, "Jesus, I think is unique. He can take these ideas and sit down at the piano. It's like a magic trick." Zevon was actually scheduled for the very first episode of Late Night in 1982, but wasn't able to appear for a reason nobody fully remembers. However, later that year, in September, he was finally able to get his wish, and Warren Zevon finally showed up on Late Night.
You actually rubbed a pot roast all over your chest.
Well, Yes, I did. I was.
Now, why exactly?
Well, remember, there's an expression, isn't there? Rub it on your chest. I don't know. It came through my mind. I felt enthusiastic. I wanted to express my appreciation for this fine cooking.
Just slopped it right on?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
The pot roast or the smearing
No,
part?
the actual part of rubbing it on your chest.
They sat on the couch and discussed three of Warren's favorite topics: music, literature, and death. There wasn't an instant chemistry or anything that made you think these two were destined to be forever linked, but the seeds were planted. They were two men who were more similar than they probably even realized. They were both sarcastic and self-deprecating. They were both brilliant and respected by their peers. They were both... How do I say this nicely? Cher, what word would you use to describe them?
An ass.
Thanks, babe. Yeah, they were both men with a reputation for their difficult personalities. Zevon wrote a song called Bill Lee about the former Red Sox pitcher of the same name that, aside from being My Desperado, is also a song that could have been written about David Letterman. The opening lyrics are, "I'm supposed to sit on my ass and nod at stupid things. Man, that's hard to do." The only stupid thing Letterman would nod at is a pet trick, and Zevon wasn't exactly known to let things go easily either. After the initial appearance, Zevon disappeared not just from late night, but music in general. It was during this period that he got sober, and when he was ready for his comeback, Letterman was ready for him. After he returned to the show in 1987, Zevon would come back pretty much at least once a year. Sometimes on the couch, sometimes in the band with Paul Schaefer, but every time blessing Dave with a performance. Even when Letterman left NBC for CBS, Zevon still came around. His musical appearances were less frequent, but he took a far bigger role instead. When Paul Schaefer had to leave for 2 weeks to film his role in the Oscar-winning film Blues Brothers 2000, it was Zevon who was brought in as a band leader. He did so well that he became the de facto choice whenever Paul wasn't around. And him and Letterman were a pretty dynamic comedic duo. The relationship extended outside the show as well, as Zevon was able to convince Letterman to provide backing vocals on one of his new songs. Letterman wasn't really known for doing much in the way of outside projects, unless of course you count his role in the Oscar-winning film Cabin Boy.
Would you like to buy a monkey?
The song was called Hit Somebody, a tale of a hockey goon who dreams of scoring a goal, but finds himself regulated to fighting as it's the only thing he's good at. Letterman didn't have to sing, he was just required to yell "Hit Somebody" over and over and over again during the chorus. Zevon even performed the song on the show in April 2002, with Schaefer taking over Letterman's vocals. You see, in typical Letterman self-deprecating fashion, he thinks he ruined the song. But personally, it's one of my favorites. 4 months later, in August, Letterman's self-consciousness over his contributions seemed so trivial, as newspapers across the country revealed a sad truth. Warren Zevon was diagnosed with cancer and wasn't expected to make it through the rest of the year. During a summer tour, Zevon had complained of shortness of breath and was persuaded by a friend to visit a physician for the first time in decades. After only a day of testing, Zevon was given the grim news. He had developed mesothelioma, and it was terminal. He was told he had 3 months to live. Zevon approached it in his typical fashion, with a dark sense of humor. He told Dwight Yoakam that he felt like he got a raw deal. He just wanted a haircut like Steve McQueen. He didn't want to die like him. He also famously told reporters that what would really bum him out is if he didn't make it to see the next James Bond movie. Publicly, Zevon seemed almost bemused by the grim prognosis. Probably the biggest recurring theme in his music was death, and here it was staring him in the face. The irony was not lost on him. I mean, he had recently released an album called Life'll Kill Ya. The news of his diagnosis hit the Letterman office hard, as all of them had grown to love Warren. The idea was floated out there to see if he would want to come on the show, but there was hesitation. For obvious reasons, Warren was worried if he could handle the stress. Of all people, it was Sammy Davis Jr. who changed his mind. Zevon was reading a biography of Sammy at the time, and after reading about how Sammy kept performing even when he was battling cancer, Zevon decided if it was good enough for the Candyman, it's good enough for him. And so he flew across the country from his home in Los Angeles to New York for what he knew would likely be his last public appearance. He rehearsed with Schaefer for that night's performance and just hoped that come showtime his body wouldn't betray him. Elsewhere in the building, a man who was not diagnosed with a fatal illness was somehow more stressed out. As a talk show host, Letterman was entering uncharted territory. He was getting nerves he had not felt before. Not only was he about to talk to a man who knew he was dying, but it was one of his friends. The decision had already been made that there'd be no other guests that night other than Warren, but still Letterman didn't know if he could do the man justice. After a standard opening of the show, Letterman brought out his only guest. As Zevon walked out, the band played his song, "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead," which got a smile from Warren and really set the tone for the rest of the night. As for the interview, well, it's what Letterman said of Warren's songwriting ability. It was like a magic trick. Honestly, you need to see the full interview on its own, but it was pure Warren Zevon. It was poignant, it was intelligent, and it was funny. Here was a man faced with his own mortality, and yet there he was making jokes about how his fear of doctors really backfired on him. Letterman set them up, Zevon knocked them down. Until finally Letterman asked him a question that deep inside we all kind of wanted to know.
From your perspective now, do you know something about life and death that maybe I don't know now?
Not unless I know how much you're supposed to enjoy every sandwich.
After maybe the most zen thing anyone has ever said, Zevon did what he excelled at. He played his music. His set list that evening was comprised of 3 songs. Mutineer from his 1995 album of the same name, Genius from his 2002 album My Ride's Here, and from his 1978 Excitable Boy album, he played Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner. Any fears he had about not delivering were unfounded, as when the lights were on, he shone bright. No disrespect to the other 2 performances, but Roland is ingrained in my mind as a defining performance in his career. As he wrapped up Roland in a glorious crescendo, Letterman came out to thank him and reminded his viewers to heed Warren's advice and enjoy every sandwich. Backstage, the normally reserved Letterman deviated from his post-show routine and decided to check in on Warren. As he told The Ringer in that 2022 article, while we're talking, he just perfunctorily is taking his guitar, taking the strap off, doing whatever you do to a guitar. He gets out the case and we're continuing to talk, and who knows what we're saying. It was small talk. Just fill the air with something while he's going through the business of putting the guitar in the thing. He puts it in, closes the lid, snaps it closed, hands it to me, and he says, "Take good care of this for me." And I burst into tears, uncontrollable. I had no idea that I'd be bursting into tears, but I did. And I hugged him and I said, "I just love your music." And that was it. That would be the last time Letterman and Zevon would see or speak with each other. And it would be the last time Zevon performed in public, but it wasn't the end of his story quite yet. Determined to make the rest of his time count, he put all his energy into completing one final album. Musicians all across the country rushed to help out, and on August 26, 2003, The Wind was released to rave reviews. If you don't know the album, you probably at least know the song Keep Me in Your Heart. It was the first song Zevon wrote when he was given his prognosis, and its beautiful lyrics about oncoming death make it a wonderful song to listen to if you want to just crawl into yourself and think about your own mortality. Zevon passed away just 2 weeks later on September 7th, outliving his initial prognosis by 10 months. I'd like to tell you on his death that Zevon has finally gotten the mainstream appreciation I think he deserves, but you and I both know that's not true. I know it's ultimately meaningless, but he is still not inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's not like he needs it though, as in a way it almost cements his legacy not to get in. He will probably never be fully appreciated. He will always be appreciated fully by those who love his music, and by none more so than David Letterman. In the years since Zevon's passing, Letterman has been unwavering in his support and admiration for the man. Artists like the Wallflowers, Dawes, Jason Isbell, and Amanda Shires all went out of the way to play Zevon songs in Letterman's show as a tribute. While inducting the band Pearl Jam into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Dave took a moment to directly appeal to the voters to induct his friend Warren. Pearl Jam didn't mind this moment from Letterman though, as it was actually Eddie Vedder who publicly thanked Letterman for introducing him to Zevon's music. It's been 20 years later, but Letterman still keeps up the fight. He doesn't fight alone though. The cult of Zevon is everywhere you look. In Ireland, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Berkeley. All of us, we try our best to look at each day and enjoy every sandwich. Hey, thanks for watching. If you dug the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. And let me know in the comments your favorite Warren Zevon songs and moments. For me, Bill Lee is my Desperado. Anyways, thanks for watching.